afternoon, actually. It's Sunday afternoon. I'm waiting for some folks to join. We have 0 so far, so I'm kind of talking into a vacuum, but I'll do my best, and I know a lot of you will be joining shortly. And just a couple of announcements before we get going. It's 3 p.m. here, West Coast time in California. I just completed the Sunday morning hike. We had about roughly 8 or 9 colleagues who came hiking today together. We went 8.7 miles, I believe, and went up 119 flights of stairs. We didn't go up stairways, it just we were going up and down mountain trails, and it was just a really beautiful experience, as it is pretty much, I would say. Oh, Gwendolyn, you're the first to join. Yeah, thank you for joining us. It was pretty magical again today. It's been kind of magical, really. All of the hikes for as long as I can remember. We worked on a number of topics. One hiker was concerned about grief a year after her father's death. Father she loved greatly, and she did some beautiful work on that. Also, we worked on, she's a therapist learning team, and she was struggling a little bit with one of the harder techniques called a paradoxical invitation. And so we practiced that. We also worked with I worked with a hiker who's having a conflict with a colleague. So we did some 5 secrets of effective communication. That went great. We also went with worked with a hiker who's feeling insecure, perfectionistic. In her again, she's learning team therapy, and she was kind of beating up on herself for being too rigid or too perfectionistic or some such thing. And again, we did some really beautiful work, including some kind of shame attacking exercises with hikers we met. We also talked about the integration of the cognitive therapy techniques, like externalization of voices, where you're talking back to your negative thoughts and identifying the distortions in them and proving to yourself that they're not really valid. By the way, Lisa, can you hear me and everything? I just hit the like button. So type in if you can hear me. I hope the audio is working. And how to integrate that with mindfulness meditation. How do these two integrate? And we came up with some really nice overlap between the two, made sense out of how they can sometimes work together. And we also worked on a powerful technique that I've created for dealing with negative thoughts, like I'm a failure as a therapist or as a mother or as a partner or as a human being. The technique is called Let's Be Specific, and it's actually a kind of path to enlightenment that's based on Buddhism, and we did quite a bit with Let's Be Specific. But it was a fantastic day. And by the way, for Lisa Kelly, I got all cleaned up after the hike and put on a nice blue shirt, so I'm not looking my usual crummy self with an old sweatshirt from the hike. So maybe this will be a step up. But again, I had a really neat dream, and I'll come to you. Gwendolyn, you're saying you missed the team training in Stanford. You relocated to Seattle. Do you know if anyone practices team up here? I suspect there are probably a number of them, and I'm going to like you here, Gwendolyn. And your best bet there would be to contact www.feelinggoodinstitute. That's one word, feelinggoodinstitute.com, and check with them. Angela Crum, a clinical psychologist there, who's the head of the certification program, and they have therapists all in different parts of the U.S. and Canada, and also some in Europe and Israel and different places, and they can put you in contact with the people in Seattle if there are some people up there. And you might also want to start your own weekly team training group and get supervision from someone like Jill Levitt at the Feeling Good Institute or Angela, so you can get your own, group going. I love having my group, the free groups Tuesday at Stanford, which are just fantastic. And then also the Sunday hikes, which are just fantastic. I'm giving and teaching, but I receive so much in response from everyone. I just tried to like Lisa. It didn't work. Said that somehow she's no longer on that page. But I think she typed in the name Angela Crum, Krumm, at the Feeling Good Institute in the address, which is helpful. Looks like Lisa, you have rejoined. And then let's see. Phil says, glad you had a nice hike. What is the best way to reach you for suggestions on your posts, email, Facebook, etc.? Well, there's two issues about that. If you comment on a post, it'll come to me, and it's real easy for me to answer it right on the website page. It comes up automatically, and then you can see your question and my comment. That's the easiest for me. When you email me directly, I can email you back with an answer, but other people then can't benefit from it and see it. So I kind of give preference to those who make comments, ask their questions via making comments on the web page. Now I can't remember where I was, but I had a dream, and I don't know if maybe I mentioned this last week or not. Lisa, did I mention about this really cool dream that I had? I can't remember. I do podcasts, I do webcasts, and do presentations all over. Sunday hikes, Tuesday groups. It's hard to remember when I've told what story to. But I had this really cool dream. It's like magical, and I woke up in a state of euphoria. And it was just about. The theme of it was like I was in this cafeteria kind of thing, and I was supposed to give a talk to these people. It was like a conventional workshop. And I was feeling kind of a lack of energy, and actually I've been feeling a little bit, tired of doing workshops and looking for some new direction this year. And then I had the dream that I found this whole new way to relate to people. And people were seated at tables. I thought, well, I could take this group of people and this group of people, and we could just start relating, kind of like the way we do on the hikes. It could be magical, because the hikes really are magical. The Tuesday groups are often magical too, especially when we're doing personal work. And then it occurred to me, wow, this Facebook broadcast on Sunday when I woke up could maybe morph into something where I could interact with all of you, and we could make real magic happen. And then Mike Christian's son emailed this week that he's going to try to set it up to where at least he could join me on some of these Sunday podcasts, and we could do role-playing together. He's a fabulous therapist and team trainer from Canada. I've mentioned him on previous podcasts. And so that will be a step up. But it just occurring to me, if I could create the magic that we have on the hikes here on these Sunday podcasts. See, this is just one way, and I'm doing my best, and I have good things to teach, and I can answer questions and tell you cool stories and things. But if we could find a way of interacting live, then I could create the magic for you rather than talking about the magic. And to me, it's just a beautiful, peaceful, mind-blowing experience that I have over and over again, just seeing people like on today's hikes, one after the next, going into states really of enlightenment. People received enlightenment on the hikes, and it was so warm and fun and funny. There were tears flowing. It was just fabulous. Here's some questions. I've gotten tons of questions. I'll just do my best to answer a few to get it going. but here's one from Shalane Dobbs. Dr. Burns, do you feel that diet has anything to do with depression and anxiety? I'm going to give you a politically incorrect answer and say I think it has zero to do with that. I'm sure half of the listeners will hate me for saying that, because people are so big on diet and things like that. But believe me, depression and anxiety result from the messages you give yourself, these distorted thoughts: I'm a failure, I'm no good, I'm worthless, I should be better than I am. And you could eat a mountain and it wouldn't affect that. You need to be able to challenge those thoughts and to change your value system. Now, I suppose if someone like with anorexia nervosa is in a state of starvation, it will affect your brain. But even there, they typically don't get depressed. I've worked with the patients at the Stanford inpatient unit with anorexia nervosa who weighed 48 pounds, and they weren't at all depressed. They were just, it was a serious life-threatening condition. But no, I don't think diet is going to be a solution to issues of self-esteem or marital conflicts or anything else. Just my point of view. David Bricker, who is a part of one of the 2 Feeling Good centers in Manhattan, and a very creative and talented mental health professional. I'm going to like you, David. He says, I just want to thank you for continuing the podcast series. You're welcome for that. I've been keeping up to date with them and recommending them to my trainees and my patients. Lots of positive reactions from all. Thank you so much. And then Karen Handley, I saw you at the psychotherapy conference and read your book. I'm a therapist and want to see how you would work with clients who have nightmares which lead to anxiety, wherein the nightmares are trauma the patient has experienced. Thank you, Karen. And actually, I hiked today with a hiker who had that exact issue. She was actually had some trauma, just to keep it general, not to betray her confidentiality, but she was raised in a country other than America where there were bombs going off and bombings and trauma, and as a child, she was often left alone to take care of her younger sibling while she could hear the rockets going through the air, and she was so terrified. She said at one point she just wanted to jump out the window with her baby brother and kill herself and him to get relief from her anxiety, and which was so intense. And then she'd been having nightmares as well. And in general, our nightmares are kind of just like waking anxiety. It's just the expression of the fact that we're feeling vulnerable at this point in our life, that we feel under some kind of threat. Usually the content of the nightmare is a symbolic expression of what's bothering us. And so I just use the typical team therapy approach with the daily mood log and sometimes visual imaging techniques. In her case, we worked on the things that were bothering her in the here and now, and she completely defeated her fears, and she's just very, very joyous now. Klaus Strom, how do you make the death of the ego happen? Well, the death of the ego, Klaus, is it's a kind of a metaphor, but often you see in therapy, you'll often feel like you're not as good as you should be. And you'll often be filled with self-criticisms, and the death of, and you're keep trying to be better than you are typically, and it's like as if you criticize yourself and beat up on yourself enough, somehow you'll achieve some state of superiority or perfection, or some wonderful thing is supposed to happen. And one of the ways to recovery or transcendence or enlightenment is when you come to the point of accepting your inadequacies, accepting your shortcomings and failures without a sense of shame, and that you stop trying to be special or to be so so perfect, and you just kind of accept the fact that you are kind of screwed up and always will be kind of flawed, and that's actually kind of a good thing, because your anxiety and your shame drives you to grow and to learn. But you give up the idea that somehow you have a self that can be judged. You see, you can't judge David's self. You could judge the video. Like, as I move my head on my screen, my head kind of jerks around in different pieces. So the video is probably could be going at a faster rate, and there could be other people with broadcasts like this who have fancier equipment and music and commercially produced, and they could be better than I am at all kinds of things. But that doesn't mean I have a self that's less than, or they have a self that's superior. And once you discover that your self can't be judged, it's a kind of an escape from a prison, and then you make the even greater escape. You give up the idea that you have a self, that there is no self. I lost myself in Philadelphia once when I was jogging home from the train station. I've mentioned that before, and I just said, oh my gosh, I'm so glad to have gotten rid of that. You see, because when you have a self, it's a way of trapping yourself into thinking you're this or that kind of object, or you have to live up to this or that standard. But a human is more like a river. We flow and we go this way and that way, and we're constantly changing, and there isn't any self in there. And when you lose yourself, you discover that you haven't lost anything. It's just kind of like a cosmic joke, because there was nothing there in the first place. But what you do gain is freedom to have joy, to enjoy the moment, to enjoy your peers, and not have to get defensive when you're criticized, but to find truth in criticism, because you have no self that you're trying to defend. And I've said it before, but I've learned that so beautifully from our animals, from our cats, and they love us. And we have a new little kitty, Misty. The neighbors gifted us when our Obi disappeared, sadly, about a year ago. He was my best friend, and now Misty's becoming my best little girlfriend, and she's becoming very affectionate, and she likes me to stroke her belly, and she stretches out like this and just wants me to just stroke her belly, and she just purrs real loudly. And I just love her, and she loves me, but it's not because she's special. She was just a cat that was found abandoned on Moody Road in a bad rainstorm. She was 3.5 weeks old. It's like in the woods, at the edge of the woods. Maybe her mother had just been killed. We have no idea, but some neighbors rescued her and then gave her to us. And she's very small. She's a small cat. She's just an average cat. She's not special. She's not trying to be special. She's just enjoying her life and living her life and loving us and letting us love her. Once you see it, it's just a real obvious thing. But people who suffer from depression and anxiety nearly always believe that they have some kind of self that isn't good enough. And this is one of the themes I'll be writing about in my new book, Feeling Great. But the death of the ego happens when you crush the thoughts, the negative thoughts that are creating your feelings of loneliness, low self-esteem, guilt, shame, inadequacy. And then also, a lot of anger comes from thinking that other people have selves, like a bad self. We think, oh, he's a jerk, or he's a bad person, or some group of people. You see this politically, like, oh, these immigrants are no good, they're inferior, they're bad, that type of thing. We start labeling others. That creates rage, prejudice, hatred, violence often. And when you label your own self, thinking you have a self that's a failure or not good enough, that creates depression and anxiety. And I see my job as leading people, kind of to a state of enlightenment, escape from these traps. Here's a general question I've set aside. I absolutely love your books. This is from Tanyu Sharma. I don't know where she lives. I'm wondering if there's one technique in particular that tends to be the most useful dealing with mind reading, since this is my biggest problem, or even a set of techniques or the appropriate section of your book to reread. Well, this is a little bit of a general question because mind reading is where you imagine that others are having negative thoughts about you, or in some cases where you think others are having positive thoughts about you, and you have no real evidence for that. So you're kind of jumping to conclusions, and if you're thinking that others are looking down on you, then you're going to feel anxious or hurt or inferior or inadequate. And then if you wrongly think that others are having really good thoughts about you when you're not, then you'll be feeling kind of happy and euphoric and overlooking conflicts that are real. And I could give you endless examples, but what I do, I like to ask people, how are you feeling right now? I'm wondering if you're having some negative thoughts right now. I sense a kind of tension between the two of us, and I'm fearful that I might have done or said something that turned you off. Is there something? And it's hard to ask that kind of question because we get awkward and we feel like we want to cover up problems and avoid problems. But I just find that's called the survey technique or inquiry. And I find that it's helpful. And then if you're not sure that the other person is telling you the truth, you can say, are you being honest with me now, or are you just blowing smoke in my face? For example, we did a kind of shame attacking exercise on the hike today. One of the hikers that I was working with is a gifted therapist, a beautiful young woman, very intelligent and great value system, but she revealed that she often feels anxious and inadequate and feels like she's not good enough, and she struggles with this or that aspect of the team therapy model that she's been learning very effectively. But like all of us, she can see certain things that she's still struggling with and still needs to learn, and she's been beating up on herself about that. So we were working with her on that, and then she had some negative thoughts on the hike. I was working with her, and then she had the thought, maybe people are getting bored with us or frustrated because they think I'm moving too slowly, that I should have gotten it. She was actually doing pretty well. She was like about 3/4 of the way to enlightenment, but not all the way. And then I asked her, well, how could you find out if people are thinking that about you? And so we stopped and had her ask the people. And one of the hikers was actually annoyed with me because he thought I was going too slowly. And so I changed my strategy, and then we got this amazing breakthrough. But she was surprised to learn that most of the hikers there were just feeling really close to her and not judging her, and just feeling like they were learning from the personal work that she was doing. And then I had her do a shame attacking exercise. This couple was kind of walking along the path very rapidly, and then I stopped them because I asked her. I said, I want you to do a shame attacking exercise, and here's what I want you to do. And then I stopped them and told her to. And then she asked them. And I had to push her to do this because she didn't want to do it. She was terrified. She said, I often feel kind of insecure and nervous and anxious, and I hide these feelings from people because I'm so ashamed. And so today I decided to start telling people, and that's what I'm telling you folks. And I'm wondering how you're thinking about me. And they just poured their hearts out. It was an older couple, and then she said the most wonderful interaction with them. Another thing I do, I get written feedback. It depends on the situation that you're in. But I do a lot of teaching, and I would never teach without getting written feedback at the end of every teaching session. And when I'm doing therapy, I get feedback from my patients at the end of every session. And I've had sessions, I've had ones in the Stanford Hospital where I just was leading a group of depressed patients and working with someone and thought I had hit the ball out of the park, and then looked at the patient's feedback, and it was absolutely atrocious. And I had been mind reading that she was loving me and thinking that the interventions were brilliant, and the written feedback and the empathy scale or written comments showed that she was profoundly unhappy with me. And so I talked it over with her, and I had said something that had rubbed her the wrong way. I didn't realize it at the time, and we were able to work it through. And then the next week I had a group, and there was a patient in there, and I thought she absolutely hated me. In fact, she'd been throwing 4-letter words at me at the beginning of the group and swearing at me, and she was actively suicidal. She was an intravenous drug user, and she had just been referred from the intensive care unit for a nearly completed suicide attempt. She had survived. They sent her to the Stanford Inpatient Hospital, and I had asked her if she wanted to work with me, and she just started telling me what a horrible human being I was, and that she'd heard that cognitive therapy was a lot of BS, and using stronger language than that, and I could stick it up my you-know-what. And so I didn't work with her during the group. I worked with another patient who also felt worthless and hopeless, and seemed like a pretty good group, but I could feel the hatred coming from this patient. I was just sure that she was just so annoyed with me. And then I looked at her feedback, and it was the most amazing feedback. And she said that, "God bless you, Dr. Burns, this group changed my life. When you worked with that other woman, I thought you were working with me." And so you have to actually ask people to get the kind of feedback, but you also have to do your inner work. That's the external solution, how you actually talk to people to find out what they're thinking. But then you also have to do the internal solution, writing down your negative thoughts. If somebody were upset with you or judging you or looking down on you, what would that mean to you? Why would that be upsetting to you? And then you write down your own thoughts, identify the distortions in them, and talk back to them. And we did a lot of that on today's hike as well. So that's just like kind of an overview. And, I just think that feedback is so crucial. I've also done research at the Stanford Hospital on the accuracy of mental health professionals with patients that you're treating. And I've done this with community therapists as well. And it turns out that even professional mental health professionals, their perceptions of how patients are feeling at any moment, if you ask them how depressed is this person from, say, 0 to 10, how anxious, how angry, and you ask the patient, how depressed are you feeling right now from 0 to 10, how angry, how anxious, there's almost no correlation. And what that means from a practical point of view is that mental health professionals who are experts, without actual written feedback, how their patients are feeling with using simple scales, their perceptions are not at all accurate. And I've done the same research between mothers and their children. The way the children are feeling, the way the mothers are thinking the children feel is often not at all similar. And so you've got to not assume that you know how people are thinking, but really go out of your way to get specific feedback. And I'm going to put done on this question so I don't answer it again. Let's see if there's some questions from you folks. What are your thoughts on social media and the incessant barrage of messages from the media? That's really a great important question, but it's just too general for me. And here it says, my friend has just released a book called The Judgment Detox. It sounds like a good topic there. Gwendolyn asks, kitties have a way of understanding. I have 6 myself. Oh, well, you're a person after my own heart. You know, Gwendolyn, I don't know if you were here when I was doing the, oh yeah, and Klaus says, my cat is actually on my lap as you're answering. Oh, great, Klaus, you're a cat person too. When for a while I ran the group at my home rather than at Stanford. There was some conflict at Stanford about what we could or couldn't do in the group, so I said, heck, I'll just have the group meet in my living room. And we had about 20 people once a week in the evening in my living room. And it was actually great, but after a while it just got to be too much for my wife, which was understandable, so I moved it back to Stanford again. But I had a cat at that time who I deeply loved popcorn. And when someone in the group would cry, like we did personal work, as we still often do in the Tuesday group, he would seem to sense it and frequently jump up on that person's lap. It was really sweet looking things. Julie Ann Linden, while I was doing my internship, my classroom instructor asked my classmates if they mailed a feedback questionnaire after the client had stopped therapy. Of course, I raised my hand as I was usually using your model and said, why wait until therapy's over? Why not ask every session? Exactly. Needless to say, your techniques quickly became the topic of discussion. Yes, I can imagine. Sure, and actually some therapists are opposed to feedback particularly, and I can't grasp why, but the psychoanalytic therapists have sometimes told their students at Stanford, you're not allowed to use these Bern scales and get feedback from your patients. They think it will somehow contaminate the transference or hurt the patient, hurt the therapy in some way. My experience has been the opposite, but my mindset, my approach is radically different, a whole different universe from psychoanalysis or even psychodynamic therapy. Brian, wow, this is fascinating. Thank you for that. Tamara Williams is here. So let's see if there's other questions. Yeah, answered that one. I don't know if I read David's, Ricker's. Yeah, I think I've answered your questions so far. If you have others, type them in, but I have a ton of them here. This one is just a kind, positive comment, a bit of an endorsement perhaps. I get a lot of those and really appreciate them. And Charlene asked, how can the person rid themselves of guilt? But feeling good was recommended to me about 10 years ago by my GP when I was experiencing mild to moderate anxiety and depression. After spending a year studying and using the exercises in the book, I was able to stop using the medication, and since then I have found my mood very stable. Well, that's neat to hear, Jess. Thank you for that. I stumbled across your podcasts a month ago. Now that's different from this. This is the weekly broadcast, but the podcast is David and Fabrice. And those are once a week also. And you can find all of them on my website, feelinggood.com, and you can go back and start from number 1, or you can find them on iTunes, or I think they're on YouTube now too. But anyway, I stumbled across your podcast a month ago and have become quite addicted to them, ! That's cool. Thank you for that. I just know that the 5 Secrets is going to change my world again. As being assertive, sharing my feelings with others is challenging for me. And Jess, that's challenging for many of us. I've been practicing over the last week, and I'm finding myself having so many beautiful interactions with colleagues that I don't particularly like. I love hearing that because I also had that experience in my clinical work. As well as in my personal life, if you use the 5 Secrets to connect with someone you don't like or you think you don't like, often you'll form a deep connection with them. But you have to be willing to experience the death of the ego and to stop blaming and try to see the world through the other person's eyes. I noticed you'll be in Winnipeg in June, and I'm trying to find a way to come to your presentation. I'm a huge fan of yours. Keep those podcasts coming. We'll definitely do that, and thank you for that. Charlene Dobbs says, how can a person rid themselves of guilt? Well, if you read any of my books, you'll find a tool, which I now call the daily mood log, where you write down the situation, circle your negative feelings, and then write down your negative thoughts. You identify the distortions in them, and then challenge those thoughts. And that's the basic format. But also in this modern era of team therapy, we're also saying what are the things that in this case, your guilt, your negative emotions show about you that's positive and awesome. And we're no longer looking at negative emotions as being necessarily bad or showing a chemical imbalance in the brain or some kind of mental disorder, but often showing, always really, showing things about you that are beautiful and positive and awesome, as well as many advantages. But one of the advantages of guilt is healthy remorse, because we often say things and we pretend it was an accident, we pretend it wasn't intentional, but I believe these things usually are intentional. We get angry and we say things that are sharp that hurt the other person's feelings. I can remember once when my son, David Eric, was young. He was protesting something about not wanting to do his homework. I don't recall the details of it, but I said something really sharp and powerful that, go downstairs right now and, do your homework, and there's something you have to do. I don't remember what it was, but it just really hurt him, whatever it was I said, and he turned and just dutifully started walking toward the stairs, just sobbing. And I realized that I'd really hurt him, and I felt I was flooded with feelings of guilt and shame and remorse. And I went and picked him up in my arms and hugged him and said, Eric, I just want you to know I love you more than life itself. And sometimes we say things and hurt the feelings of someone we love, and I want to ask you for your forgiveness. And so sometimes our guilt, and then he hugged, and it was really a beautiful moment. And then other times our hug, our guilt, our negative feelings can be way over on the distorted side. I remember I had a patient who had obsessive compulsive type symptoms, and one of the things that was a problem to him was guilt. And the way he would think was that he said, for example, just last week, a woman where I work asked me for instructions how to get somewhere, and so he gave her instructions on the best route to get to City Hall or the train station or wherever, and then he was obsessing, saying, oh my goodness, what if she takes the route I suggested and then eventually gets into an accident and gets killed? That will be my fault, because if I hadn't given her the instruction, she would have gone a different way. Her life would have taken a different path, and she wouldn't have been killed. And so if she ever dies, that means that I'm a murderer. And he was obsessing about this constantly and feeling guilt. And that would be the most extreme example of neurotic guilt. So I would say that guilt, like all negative emotions, has a very healthy side to it and a very unhealthy side. But I use writing down the negative thoughts that make us upset, and then they'll have all these distortions like should statements and self-blame and all or nothing thinking and discounting the positive, and then you can use we have many techniques to talk back to those. But I think if you read my book Feeling Good or the Feeling Good Handbook, you'll find a lot of great techniques for crushing guilt. David Klaus asked if you had patients suffering with much lack of energy. Well, certainly a loss of motivation and energy is one of the symptoms of depression. And I've had, a good 35,000 therapy sessions with patients struggling with mild, moderate, severe, or extreme depression. Scott, and I'm going to like you. I'm clicking these likes as much as I can remember to. Xiaoling and Gwendolyn, I liking you. Let's see. Hi, David. I love what you do. Feeling good really helped me in college, and I love your podcasts. My question: what are your thoughts about coaching versus therapy, on being a therapist, and on a therapist being both? I'm going with a master's degree in clinical mental health. Let's see more. Let me see more what this says. But I personally find it hard for anyone to improve their lifelong terms without goals and clarifying values. I tend to think coaching can help people do that better. What are your thoughts? Well, there's no such thing as coaching or psychotherapy. Those are just terms that we make up. And it really, the issue is how do we best help people who are suffering and struggling and help them get out of the black holes of depression and anxiety or relationship problems. And the team CBT that I have developed is kind of based on research on how psychotherapy really works. It's the essential ingredients of all therapy, or coaching for that matter, and in my hands, it's just dramatically more effective than anything I've ever seen in the past. I was proud to have helped develop and launch cognitive therapy, and that's now the most popular form of therapy in the world. And now I think the team CBT is 1 or 2 or 10 steps beyond cognitive therapy. But the label psychiatrist, psychologist, clinical social worker, coach, marriage and family therapist, nurse practitioner, pastoral counselor, these terms, or addiction counselor, don't mean that much to me. To me, it's really how skillful are you in helping people, and if you come to my training groups, how flexible are you? How hungry are you to learn? What kind of effort will you put into it? And I've seen people with very advanced degrees and world famous reputations who really I wouldn't send my dog to for therapy, if you want to know the honest truth. And I've seen other people who were viewed by colleagues as being kind of inept and not very colorful or attractive individuals, and then I've looked at their outcome data from the work that they're doing, and it's just been spectacular. Just quiet geniuses, quiet healers, healing people. So that's kind of my take on it. But when I was a medical student, I used to go to these 24-hour or 72-hour, actually 48-hour and 72-hour psychodrama marathons here in Palo Alto, and the leader was Hussein Shung, who sadly passed away recently. But those were very powerful healing experiences, wild and perhaps a little uncontrolled. But amazing things happened, and I learned a tremendous amount. And the people running these marathons were just lay individuals who happened to have this gift of doing what they did. Scott here, love what you do. Oh yeah, I just answered that one. Yeah, let's see. Lisa Kelly says, Feeling Good podcasts are released on Mondays. You can sign up to receive them via email on David's website, www.feelinggood.com. You can also find them on iTunes. Thank you for that. And I wish more people would go. We're getting like 40,000 downloads a month on the podcast, and I'm getting 40,000 visitors a month to my website, or hits on my website. but there's only about 1,000 people have signed up on my website to receive the notifications when I publish things there, and to receive them there. And I wish more of you would sign up. I don't know how to get more people to sign up, although everything is developing nicely. I'm excited by all the support you are all providing. Let's see, Tamara Williams. Sound familiar? The children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for their elders and love chatter in the place of exercise. Children are now tyrants, not the servants of their households. They're no longer rise. Not quite understanding this. They no longer rise when elders enter the room. They contradict their parents, chatter before company, gobble up dainties at the table, cross their legs, and tyrannize their teachers. Oh, Socrates said that in 409 to 399 BC. Well, there you go. Oh, great. Yeah, a lot of this stuff isn't new. That's neat. Thanks for sharing that. Tamara says, to the person that was inquiring about the news, social media, I had this memory this week. Nothing has changed in 2,500 years, just our filters and the process of enlightenment. Yes, absolutely. And then Jan Prinz, Dr. Burns, I'm a grief therapist with the Bay Area Hospice. Nice finding you live online. I find many people in bereavement suffer from unwarranted guilt. They often feel there is something they should have done, or some medical advice they should have had. Yes, absolutely. And in my trauma workshop, and by the way, if you're interested, if you're a grief therapist, you'd be welcome to join the Tuesday group at Stanford, which is free of charge for Bay Area mental health professionals. We meet on Tuesdays from 5 to 7:30, and we're going to start a 12-week beginners group soon, because we have so many newbies who have joined up because of my presentations in Anaheim at the Evolution of Psychotherapy conference. There were quite a few thousand people down there who heard my presentations, which was a great privilege for me. But at any rate, in my trauma workshop, I present a case of a woman with terminal cancer. In fact, you can hear my treatment of Marilyn, a dear colleague who was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and you can find her. Last week, I put the dates. If you go to my Feeling Good, the Feeling Good podcast, I treated her live in a series of podcasts. It's with one session, but broken up into 3 or 4 podcasts with commentary on each aspect of the session. If you'd like to see the approach that I've developed for treating individuals with grief or terminal illness. But you're right, they're often very blaming themselves or being self-critical. I have found in my clinical work that people with terminal illnesses are not always, but usually some of the easiest to treat and some of the most gratifying to treat. But rather than going further into that, I'll see if we got some other questions here too. Karen Handley, I like you. Can you explain your team program and about your free training sessions? I live in Southern California, but want to come up to the area and go to one of the sessions. And which room is it in? Yes, that'd be great. If you're a mental health professional, you'd be more than welcome to visit our group. Just email me and let me know that you're coming, and I'll give you the address and so forth. It's in the Behavioral Sciences building at Stanford. There is a consent form that you need to sign, because sometimes we do personal live work. And then if you like it, there are similar weekly online groups at the Feeling Good Institute. And Mike Christensen from Canada, he's got a fabulous introductory 12-week online class and team, and he's going to join me soon for one of these Sunday broadcasts. Jill Levitt, who I want to do something called the David and Jill Show, if any of you would be interested, where we would meet with a group like this, but have two-way exchanges and try to kind of create some of the magic that we do on the Sunday hike. The details aren't real clear to me, but I'm excited about that. But at any rate, they now have, Jill Levitt has a 12-week introductory, I think, weekly training and team therapy. If you're interested in learning more, you can also go to my website, feelinggood.com, and find order forms for my psychotherapy ebook, which is called Tools, Not Schools of Therapy. That teaches you TEAM in a step-by-step way with interactive exercises while you're reading. There's a lot. You may not be looking to learn new techniques, but if you'd like to learn about team, I have tremendous resources for you, most of them free resources, like to listen to the systematic weekly Feeling Good podcast. Go back and start with podcast number 1, and Fabrice and David will teach you all about team therapy and how it differs from other forms of psychotherapy and why we're so excited about it. Lisa says, Feeling Good, the new mood therapy was published in 1980 and has sold almost 6 million copies across the world and translated into 25, actually I think now 35 languages. It took David 8 years to get it off the ground by himself. Then it suddenly took off after an interview on a national TV show. That's exactly right. And I hope I get a chance on a national TV show when my new book, Feeling Great, comes out too, because the breakthroughs in the new group are as much of an orbital jump as Feeling Good was back in 1980, an orbital jump way beyond other forms of psychotherapy, and now I have something that's going to be an orbital jump even beyond that, I believe. Let's see. Got Brian Sohn here, Scott Marshall. Scott says, thank you for your answer. I love Team CBT because of what you said. Outcomes, yes, fast outcomes. That's what I've always wanted to see. I will be at a training sometime. I'll look forward to that. David Bricker says, will you be giving a workshop in the Philadelphia area soon? I wasn't clear from the internet or anywhere else. I'm going to be cutting back on live workshops, David. I've reached a little bit of a point of diminishing returns with them. I've been doing them for 25 years or more and loving it, but the crowds are dwindling a bit. I think, people are kind of following fads, and I think a lot of people are turning to online work. So what I'm going to be focusing on more this year is see what I can do online to bring some of the magic to people live. I want to move far beyond this format. Like the hikes, like fantastic things happen. Magic happens. It's mind-boggling. You see people just being transformed before your very eyes. I can tell you about that. But a lot of you don't know what I mean, or you think I'm a con artist, or how could that be true, or whatever. And I'd like to kind of do it, if I can find a way to do it online rather than just talking about it, because I think there's so much that we can give to the world right now. If I can just find a way to show it, to show people what's possible with this. But I think it's a fantastic new approach. But I will be giving some workshops. I'll still be doing my four-day intensive in San Francisco this summer. I will be at the Philadelphia area soon. I'm going to be in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in the middle of March doing my 2-day trauma workshop for J&K seminars. And that's always a wonderful event. There's usually a pretty strong audience, and I'll be doing 2 days on treating trauma with Team CBT, and I'll also do a live demonstration between day 1 and day 2 in the evening to try to bring the magic to life. And so if someone wants to hear me live, that would be an option. I'm going to be doing 2 anxiety workshops in Canada, plus a 4-day intensive in Whistler. And you can find these on my website. I have to update some of these dates on my website, but there will be some in-person presentations this year, but just far fewer than in previous years. Let's see, William Peden, and his name rhymes with Eden and Sweden. Okay. Huge thanks to you, David Burns. I started reading your work 2 years ago after my first big heartbreak, and they helped me to be very successful in my studies while also becoming happier, more confident, friendlier, and healthier. Yes, exactly. My friends and family are amazed. I've used most of your techniques, but for me, the double standard method and the somatic method are the single most powerful. I graduated with a PhD in philosophy last week. Hey, congrats on that. I wish we could talk. Your books, podcasts, and interviews have all been immeasurably useful for me, and I shall be grateful for the rest of my life. Well, thank you for that. Do you have any specific advice for avoiding depression in creative and uncertain jobs like academia? Thanks. Well, sure I do. I mean, you should know that the negative thoughts will come back over and over throughout your life. There's no such thing as permanent, irreversible happiness, but the method that helped you initially is the same method that will help you every time you get down in the dumps. Now, you mentioned you're into philosophy. I want to show you something on the screen here, show you my hero, really. Just I have to grab something here for you. Here's my hero. Did you, there we go. Are you familiar with Wittgenstein from your studies in philosophy, or this beautiful book by Norman Malcolm? You see, I was a philosophy major at Amherst, and I was going to get a PhD in philosophy. And then my senior year, one of my roommates, Phil Allen, who was a wonderful person, and he went on to become a solid-state physicist at Stony Brook in New York. My senior year, he said, you should read this book by Ludwig Wittgenstein called Philosophical Investigations. And it's rumored it has the solution to all the problems of philosophy. And so I started reading it, but I couldn't understand what it meant. And then it came to me all of a sudden, in the spring of my senior year, I understood what he was trying to say. And it solved for me all the problems of philosophy, like the free will problem and all these other problems. It was like an enlightenment for me. And that's why I decided to go in a more practical direction. He wanted all of his students to give up philosophy. And he was bitterly disappointed when Norman Malcolm, he's one of the only 7 people rumored in the world who could understand Wittgenstein at the time, who he went on to become a top philosopher, professor at Princeton, I believe. But this book was the thing that really brought it home for me. And when I read this book, I cry so much because he was such a lonely individual and such a depressed person. And I think 2 or 3 of his brothers actually committed suicide. And he was so depressed he never tried to publish anything in his life, and he spent half the time thinking his work was rubbish. And now many people view him as the greatest philosopher of all time. Now, you're a PhD student, so your understanding would be vastly beyond my own. And your own ideas about this might be quite different, but that's why I went into psychiatry and eventually kind of went more into psychology to do something practical. But the sad thing is that the very same mental errors that cause the problems of philosophy are the same mental errors that cause depression, and he didn't know how to, or even realize that he could have applied his own fantastic breakthroughs in philosophy to his own thinking about himself. And I think he was very lonely because so few people in the world could understand what he was saying, and he sensed he was onto a very major breakthrough. And I always wanted to say to him, well, I understood it. I got it. And I understood the importance of what you were doing, and I'm your number one fan. And he ended up kind of almost in homelessness, and had a very sad death in England, really. He gave up his teaching at Oxford, I think, because he felt he had nothing to offer. And the paradox was he was at the time viewed as perhaps the greatest man in the history of philosophy, certainly by far the greatest 20th century philosopher. But there was so much sadness there, and what he did was such a spectacular breakthrough. But I can understand his frustration because it's so simple. It's like what the Buddha was teaching, so simple. It's hard for people to get it, and it's still hard for me to explain it to people. And there is a kind of loneliness and enlightenment, because you can see things that other people kind of invisible maybe to other people. But it gives me great joy to go on hikes and to lead others into what feels very much like enlightenment and like a sudden extraordinary joy and peace and the death of the ego. Well, that's perhaps enough for today. I just want to thank you again, Lisa, for making all of this happen, and all of you for supporting me here. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it here. Mona Kaufman, I like you. And Rob DiGregorio, my number one guy. Yeah, I don't know if this is your first Sunday feeling good thing, Rob. Rob writes me every Monday. He's come to many live workshops. Rob is just a brilliant and wonderful human being, one of my favorite human beings in the world. I think my two favorite fans are my late cat, Obi, who I loved more than life itself, and Rob. And I haven't told you this, Rob, but I think I'm going to devote my new book, Feeling Great, to you and to my cat, Obi. I hope that won't seem like an insult to me. But anyone who's on the same level as my cat, Obi, to me, you're right up there with, I would say with God, but I wouldn't know what that phrase refers to. But at any rate, thank you all for being so great. And as I say, I'm very hopeful that this year will evolve what we're doing here into more exciting, more dynamic life forms, so to speak, so that we can bring this to an even higher plane. That's what I'm really hoping. So anyway, thank you all, and Lisa, I hope you like my shirt here and my cleaned appearance for a change. And I hope you all have a terrific week. And those of you who are tuned into the Feeling Good podcast, I hope you like tomorrow morning's podcast. Okay, so that's about it. And one last thing, Williams Peden, to answer your question, David, my best ever undergraduate grade was in a course called The Philosophy of Wittgenstein. Darn it, I wish we could talk. I am a fan too. I'm touched by your compassion for his suffering. I suppose the key lessons from what you say is that enlightenment. Let's see. It can be a lonely place, but we must all be patient with others who listen and listen respectfully for them. For that's for sure. And then my work is in logic. One day I want to have a big project bringing together logicians and psychotherapists together, because I think we can learn a lot from each other. Oh, I agree. And that's, if you learn the 10 cognitive distortions in my book Feeling Good, and all of my books, it's really all about logic. And now, so I do not drag this on, I'm going to hit reluctantly the finish button. But once again, thank you, and have a great evening and a great week.